Hello and welcome to another art stream with myself, Pharaoh, featuring my co-hosts Alexander Adams and Panama Hat. How are you doing, gentlemen?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Are you not doing your slogans this week?
Oh, diversity is our strength, comrades. So, my apologies, Chairman.
Yeah, we have nothing to lose but our chains, comrades. Smash the government.
And patriarchy.
I'm also doing fine, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Cool. So we're gathered here this evening to chat through what I think is a very interesting and overlooked, I guess you call it genre of painting, Orientalism. I'm gonna have a real problem saying this word tonight, so apologies everyone for my.
Apparently, you've already misspelled it.
Oh,
the chat is telling you that you've misspelled it in the thumbnail.
There we go. Apologies. But what? So maybe we should kind of start off talking a little bit about the background to it.
I thought maybe we had something to discuss before that.
Oh yes, sorry. Of course, going straight into it. We did want to kind of catch up about the events because obviously all of us were there. Alex, Panama, and myself had a talk on a variety of subjects. I mean, Alex had the most art-related talk, but I feel like Panama's talk was like had the spirit, the artistic spirits behind it as well. So,
well, there was much mention of aesthetic concepts and literature as well. That I kind of said, like, look, these things are enormously necessary for any movement going forward. So yes, I'm very, very keen on that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I would say that Pharaoh gave a fantastic performance. And Panama's speech was flawless. I mean, these were two very good speeches, and they were completely different. So Pharaoh's was more image-based and more improvised. Well, I mean, it was memorized, but it was sort of improvised, and then Panama's was like a sort of a brilliant rhetorical display, flawlessly delivered, and they were so different, and they were just sort of perfect in their own ways. And I would say that if anyone's interested, the book, all three of our talks are available in full in the book of the event. So if you go to the shieldingsevents.com or whatever it is, I can't remember it, and then you can still purchase a copy of that book.
Yes, please do, because it was really interesting, and I'm very pumped to see what comes out of it next. I've actually been speaking to one of the guys who was talking, Edward Slingsby, about doing like a follow-up to the talk, architecturally speaking, in collaborations with the Foundations podcast, doing some like architectural drawing classes to try and bring back that traditional skill of drawing buildings again. So maybe that would appeal to people listening today as well. So keep your ear out. We've got a brilliant architect hopefully lined up, and we'll try and do it over Zoom. So it's going to be like a guide to drawing buildings, because there's a certain knack, I think, to it, especially if you've had if you've done portraits and landscapes before. I think it's a different skill set slightly. Alex, have you ever tried to draw a building before?
I have tried, and it's very tricky. It has very particular demands. If you've grown up drawing figures and landscapes, it's got a very particular set of demands. And artists, especially fine artists, are not usually trained in these very well. I mean, so one of the things that is beaten into you is not to use a ruler.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is something that you need for architectural drawings.
You do. It's. I find it very, very hard because again, there's just so many straight lines as well, and normally you can get away with them. Like you can get away with the occasional wonky line, but you can really tell when a window's on the wonk, basically. So it's a very unforgiving.
Yes, you can measure the mistakes.
Yeah. Panama, is there any way of turning yourself up? You're quite quiet.
I'm not sure why that is. Let me could always step into it.
Have a muddle around. But yes, so hopefully that'll be a nice kind of positive thing. And then, but maybe we should try and I don't know what a good event follow-up would be for us. I was thinking maybe we need Alex to take us around an exhibition sometime, like a private tour. But
yes, sounds good. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, you mean like in real life?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yes.
Because
absolutely.
you can sometimes get like experts talking about stuff. We'll have to wait for the right show. Is there anything on your radar? You see,
there is something on my radar. There is a Rossetti show opening in
Okay.
Bath at the end of this month. So it will get in before the lockdown. I would say get in before the vax passports.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly, I'm certainly up for meeting up in Bath to go around to do a little tour. So if you're interested, maybe I would say contact Ferro via Twitter. Is that best?
Yeah, if we get enough interest, I think we can set something up. That'd be quite fun. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, let's go to the main event tonight.
Maybe just before we go then, clarifications and corrections. I got one thing wrong in the last Dali stream. When poor old Dali went a bit bonkers after Gala died, he decided that he was not going to eat. He was going to desiccate himself by not consuming any food and any water. And this meant that he could no longer speak properly because his vocal cords dried out. And I got something wrong. I said he was, for the rest of his life, from 1983 to 1989, he was on an intravenous drip. He was not on an intravenous drip. He was on a nasal drip. So if you see any photographs of him, you will see that he has a tube up his nose, just like Gerard in Peep Show.
That's gross. That's even worse in some ways, I think, than the.
It's even more demeaning. It's a pitiful thing. So, but please go back and listen to our 3-part stream on Dali. It was great fun, and I think we all learned quite a bit, even though we did miss Panama for one of them.
Yes. Okay. So Orientalism. I guess just to kind of start off, Alex came back with a large list of potential subjects, and this one jumped out at me as something that's really interesting. And I guess the kind of reason why is that it's something that I've been interested in. I had a few books. I've got a very expensive. I had to pay a lot of money for it. A catalogue raison or whatever it's called. Raisonné, sorry. Of Jerome.
Ooh.
It was literally
lucky
like
boy.
Well, it was literally like £100, and I had to get it from France. It was ridiculous, but it's one of my favourite books in my reference collection. So, but it's something that isn't really talked about. Like again, if I think back to like Dali or to like everyone we've talked about, I've seen like a show on or like a TV show on like social realism or even the Quattrocento stuff, even quite like edgy and out there stuff. But I've never seen a program or a real big talk or even a show on Orientalism. So it's this kind of thing that like this series of paintings that happened that has been, I would say, totally disregarded and ignored by modern society. But through my various bits of research and, again, picking up various books here and there, it was something that was unbelievably mainstream at the time and, unbelievably popular. We'll talk about some of those figures in a second, but, hugely popular, hugely influential, but I would say majorly forgotten today. The other interesting thing for me about Orientalism is that it always comes up in like trad art accounts. So if you're on Twitter at all or on Instagram and you're following like you get these trad art posters that kind of like it's like a pipe of beautiful but sometimes dubious quality paintings. Orientalists come up a lot because of their hyper realism, because of their beauty, and so I think people know a lot about the pictures. A lot of the paintings you'll see today, people will have seen beforehand, but won't know any of the background. So I was hoping to try and add a bit of depth to all of those trad posters that are out there. But Alex, I didn't know if you
yes,
anything to say about it.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say that it's incredibly timely, because although AA didn't realize it, we're actually going to be featuring one of the paintings that he turned into a meme, or someone turned into a meme about him.
Yes, literally today. It was
just literally
so funny.
today. The Persian, he was babbling
Persian
on
rug
about Persian rugs, and he posted a Jerome painting, which we're going to discuss later.
You know, I'll bring that up now, actually, while you're chatting through.
And there are various captions, and I think Panama Hat and Pharaoh both appear in the meme. So
wow.
That's well, you haven't seen it. Oh well,
no, I haven't seen this one yet.
Oh well, I don't know if you're going to be flattered or not, but
also
it wasn't my doing. It was just.
It?
Oh, you sound very good now. Yeah, I'm much clearer.
Very good. Yeah.
So anyway, Orientalism. Yeah, Pharaoh, good introduction. Orientalism was a staple of the British and French art scene, the academic painting branch in the 19th century, and first decade of the 20th century. It has gone into eclipse in the same way that Victorian painting also went into an eclipse, but it's recently been revived, not least by the Orientals themselves. So you'll find that lots of various emirs of the Middle East have founded their own galleries, founded their own museums, and they are buying up these paintings as examples of documentation of their Arabic past. There is a political context as well, which is reason why it's been partly ignored, which I'm going to cover very briefly, and then we're going to dispose of it because it's not worth discussing.
Yeah, I can sort of, when taking a look through some of the pictures, you can sort of see why it has been abandoned. You know, it's all about the kind of colonial gaze. It's all about the kind of there's often talk about the kind of the fetishizing of the East, but I was actually thinking just like how ridiculously, again, quote unquote, diverse some of the pictures are. And I'm genuinely surprised it hasn't been rehabilitated, because I'm pretty sure that they painted more black people in this genre than like through the whole 2,000 years of Western history, basically. So, but I guess it's not on their terms, so that's why it's never going to be selected.
Well, and of course that sort of leftist thought, it's never really about the group they claim it is. It's not like they have any actual interest in the things they talk about. It's all power anyway. So let's not expect any even-handedness from those people.
Okay. Is there anything else on the preamble, Alexander, or should we just go straight in?
No, just that we're going to be concentrating on French artists. There will be a couple of others coming in if we finish everything on our list. But there is room for us to do further talks on related branches of Orientalism.
I would just like to mention now the existence of quite a pernicious text, which I'm sure you're both familiar with, called Oriental. ready to go. Edward W. Said's Orientalism. Yes. Now, you can't really bring up Orientalism nowadays without references to this text, and it's impossible to understate the influence that this particular book has had on the general interpretation of Western Orientalist art, I suppose. For better or, well, I suppose mostly for worse, really. I mean, from a literary point of view, anyway.
Do you want to do a little introduction to Said?
Okay, yeah. So basically, I'll cover this quite briefly, and we're not going to make this a big thing. And so basically, Edward Said was a Palestinian-born American academic. He was a Marxist. He was a follower of Gramsci. And he wrote Orientalism in 1978, it's come to be seen as the foundation text of subaltern theory, decolonization, and post-colonial studies. And essentially, it's working backward from a dislike of the West and sort of trying to. Well, anyway, I'll read you a couple of quotes and then I'll explain why I don't think we should take it very seriously. So he writes, by Orientalism, I mean several things, all of them, in my opinion, interdependent. The most readily accepted designation of Orientalism is an academic one, and indeed the label still serves in a number of academic institutions. Anyone who teaches, writes about, or researches the Orient, and this applies whether the person is an anthropologist, sociologist, historian, or philologist, either in its specific or its general aspects, is an Orientalist, and what he or she does is Orientalism. Compared with Oriental studies or area studies, it is true that the term Orientalism is less preferred by specialists today, both because it is too vague and general, and because it connotes high-handed executive attitude of the 19th century and early 20th century European colonialism. He goes on a little way, and then he says, in a quite constant way, Orientalism depends for its strategy on this positional superiority, which puts the Westerner in a whole series of possible relationships with the Orient, without ever losing him the relative upper hand. And why should it have been otherwise, especially during the period of extraordinary European ascendancy from the late Renaissance to the present? So the scientist, the scholar, the missionary, the trader, or the soldier was in or thought about the Orient because he could be there or could think about it with very little resistance on the Orient's past, unquote.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That's perfect to kind of key some of this up, and especially around the anti-colonial decolonizing rhetoric, because I think one of the big critiques are about the power dynamic, and again, it's all about this kind of power, the mega powerful colonialist force in this foreign land. Now, what I'm hoping we're going to show tonight is that power dynamic, as described in that passage, is totally fictitious. And again, you got to remember at the time the real power that the Ottomans had and the place that they played, especially in the kind of latter part of the Grand Tour, or the Near East Grand Tour that I'll talk about in a second. So often these colonial people were not in charge of the countries that they're painting in. They were in some, but not all of them. And then secondly, I personally feel like a lot of the painting is very, very generous. They could have approached it from a kind of like. If you wanted to kind of depict those local people as savages, it's that you could easily do it in a number of ways. But when I see Orientalist paintings, and hopefully all the audience will see it too, that there is a love, a romanticism. If anything, I think they're too generous with the people. They're creating these almost like slightly false moments. These false, beautiful moments of romance that don't actually exist and didn't exist then and definitely don't exist now. So, if anything, I think it's the other way round. But Alex, what's your thoughts on that?
I'll briefly put my position and then hand over to Panama. So my position is this idea that the West always saw that Orientalism is a product of colonial otherization and colonial sort of the need to establish and to survey its lands. Well, in a degree, it was information collection. But you'll actually find that this colonial aspect was not religious in basis, and it was not racial in basis. It was not even national in basis. It was actually class in basis, because you'll find that the upper class and the upper middle class academics, civil servants, and colonial administrators did this not only to their possessions in the Orient, but they also did this to their own countries, to their own countrymen. You find them going to the Hebrides or Brittany or Arles, for example, when Van Gogh goes to Arles. He went there and he wanted to paint a particular type. He wanted to paint a throwback. He wanted to go back to authenticity, to a rural type, a sort of an original earlier, more rudimentary and authentic civilization, and that this was the sort of thing that happened all over the world, including in countries and even in towns. So you had like the missionary, you had Christian missionaries going to the centres of British cities and doing missionary work in British cities. So this is not a purely sort of East and Western dynamic. This is a class dynamic, I would say. And so I would say that I would completely reject Said's interpretation. If you want to see my sort of more clearly thought out thoughts on this, go to on my blog, where I've written a review of Gauguin in Martinique, and there I discuss this in a more clear form.
Wonderful, and it's a really good article, so please check it out.
I would add that, so in support of what Alexander said, I think that, so partially the upswing in what we'd call Orientalist paintings, and as you said, paintings of places like the wild Scotch Islands and these sort of places, was that around the time of the, correct me if I'm wrong, but around the time of the academic movement or the academic school, life in the West was becoming more industrial, or it had become. It was quite bourgeois and in many senses quite inauthentic. Many of the problems of modernity were beginning to set in quite harshly. So people
remember that Dr. Johnson went to the Hebrides, I think, didn't he?
He did, yes.
To do exactly this kind of anthropological study.
Basically, and because he had a very unfavorable opinion of the Scots, he put in his dictionary that he defined oats as a grain which in England is given to horses, but in Scotland supports the people. Which I quite like. Yes, and so there was that kind of clamoring for authenticity. And the second point I'd like to make about Orientalism is that I feel that it is historically justified. Basically, I think that, as has been sort of mentioned before, the way in which the Middle East and the Arabs and the Turks and so forth are depicted in a lot of Orientalist art and a lot of Orientalist books is quite an accurate portrayal of how it was at the time in that part of the world. And as you say, so many of the paintings imbue them with a strong sense of nobility and of a kind of high culture. And there's a clear respect and a kind of awe at the sort of primordial magnificence of Middle Eastern lands at the time, in a lot of the art I've seen, certainly. And I think, as you say, Farah, there are some cases it's a bit too generous, given some of the things that were happening in the Middle East at that time. So yes.
And again, I think again, for people, if you've not seen any of these paintings, I think the things that are probably more shocking are around slavery and around the women and the whiteness of the women compared to the dusky skinned of their nature of their owners. But
I got it before me, damn you!
Oh, sorry.
But when we discuss that, there are some also there are very, very, very important historical points to make about that particular.
And specifically, I brought up this map here, and just look at the Balkans. You got to remember that the Balkans are part of the Ottoman Empire, and the slavery was still around at the time. So everything, to my knowledge, I mean, I'm sure there's like one or two paintings, but in the whole, it was accurate. People went to the places. They may not have painted all of the paintings at that place, but they've tried to create an authentic interpretation of those places in general. I think so. I genuinely think that anyone just discounting the genre for those circumstances, for those kind of reasons, sides is awful in my opinion. But I just wanted to kind of bring up this map just to talk about a few interesting things. So obviously, yes, the kind of Ottomans basically cover all of the Near East, and they're interesting. Yeah, almost. Yeah, they are a global superpower. It's definitely waning, and I think they're getting basically more and more westernized, and I think that's probably why that they had this sort of started to happen, because of the kind of penetration and also a couple of other things. You've got Algeria being taken over by the French, and then Egypt, which obviously got conquered by the French under Napoleon, then by the British, and then I think it was a kingdom at this point.
It was a sort of puppet kingdom of Britain.
Yes,
basically.
Exactly. And what's interesting about Egypt is that it basically created the second Grand Tour, and that's really important to note. So obviously, from like the 1750s, you've got the kind of European Grand Tour from people in the UK, where you go to kind of France, down to Italy, etc. Just taking all of the kind of best sites of Europe. You'll go to the Alps, etc. But there was this kind of rise of the Oriental Grand Tour, where people from France and the UK would go to Cairo, go through to Jerusalem, and then up to Damascus in modern day Syria, as this kind of like Oriental tour. So it was a very well trodden route. I've got a little. I know this is mainly going to be talking about the French. I've got a little section on Holman Hunt, and he has a double book diary talking through his adventures as part of the tour. But what's interesting is that there is, I would say, a large European and expat network of people all around the Ottoman Empire already, but by this kind of period. So. And they're doing things like they're running hospitals, they're like being advisors to the Ottomans, etc.
Lots of missionaries.
Lots of missionaries as well. So you've got this network of people, you've got this kind of tour and group of places, and so it's ripe for artistic and adventurous souls to go and explore and capture some of those moments.
And something important to note as well is that this is not 1400. This is 1850. This map, and there would be a large upswing in interest in this place in the world because, of course, Britain and France will go to war against Russia as allies of the Ottoman Empire. Not long after this, I believe. Was it before or after? I think it was after.
It's 20 years. Yes.
Yeah, 20 years after. So yes,
your point the other day that the French have had several Islamic alliances as well. They've always had this history of a relationship with Islam, which is quite interesting.
Yes, Louis le Grand and his Ottoman alliance when Europe was, being pillaged by Turks. Disgusting behavior.
And also Algeria as well. And again today, the French and Algerians were kind of fully integrated within France at the time, which again
it was considered a province of France, Algeria. It was not treated as a colony.
Yeah, that's why it's marked as white.
Okay. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So just to set the groundwork, this is Thomas Couture's "The Decadence of the Romans," 1879. Very large painting. I believe it's in Rhode Island at the moment, in Providence. Yeah. And so this is sort of like a typical example of French academic painting. So you have the grand scale, you have the classical settings, you have a little bit of titillating nudity, which will be coming up later on. And you have this interest in ancient civilizations and the idea of capturing, sort of like is trying to do this is the way that films are made these days, and they want to try and get the togas right. They want to get the hair right. They want to get the beard right. So it wants to look authentic. It's never quite authentic, but it's attempting to get close to it. And this is the equivalent of one of these Hollywood historical blockbusters. So it's more sort of was it Cecil DeMille? More than Gladiator, but So anyway, this was the taste of the day, and this was why, and this was considered, and this also had a moral aspect. This was also a didactic painting. History painting has to contain, if it is to be properly history painting, has to contain a moral or a narrative which you can derive a moral from. And here it was. This noble civilization, noble in art and in architecture and in culture, became debauched, and this is why it fell. So this is the didactic element, and this is something that we will see carried into Orientalism and also contrasting with Orientalism.
Just on that, I mean, I would say that they didn't have to have that moral element, but they did consider paintings to be a moral force for good or ill, and so you do have those kind of themes coming through. Just stepping back a second as well, what do we mean by academic in terms of like as a type of painting? But I mean, I would define it as in the 19th century, you've got the rise of the big art schools, or the Royal Academy, École de Beaux-Arts in Paris, and I think there's an Italian one as well. But it's essentially
it's in Spain too.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. But I guess it's the rise of these formal artistic institutions which are pumping out artists. So they normally were created in like the late 18th century, but this is, I would say, academic painting is like the second generation of those artists, basically. So it's kind of it's post-romantic as well.
Yes and no. So academic is, I mean, basically it sort of has its origin in the late Renaissance, but it doesn't kick into full gear until the 17th century, really. But yeah, so academic painting means two things. So one is it is literally paintings by people who have been trained at an academy, as opposed to the old system, which was where you had an apprenticeship under a master and then you joined a guild. That was the old system. So academic painting was literally by paintings by the students of academies. And the second meaning is slightly more pejorative, slightly, I mean, especially in the modernist period. So academic means you are painting to a particular formula or set of guide rules, depending on how you want to cast it. And these include accuracy to source material, accuracy to historical knowledge, realism, sort of reduction of brushwork and so forth. So it's sort of relatively naturalistic in style, and so forth. And it's sort of carefully composed, and also that it has either a narrative or a didactic, or both, or didacticism included in it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just going back to kind of where some of this is coming from as well, like I guess kind of classicism was the previous main core of paintings historically as well. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so here we have a crossover. So this is a historical painting of Rome, painted by one of our favorite Orientalists, a mainstay of this coming stream. So this is by Jean-Léon Gérôme, 1824 to 1904. So he was painting all the way up until the beginning of the early modern period. And this is, and we'll be looking at his Orientalist paintings. This is not strictly speaking Orientalist painting, but it's a historical painting. So here we have the spectacle, we have the being immersed in a particular place, seeing a particular event. We've got some gladiators fighting in the Colosseum in Rome, well, presumably in the Colosseum in Rome. It's certainly grand enough for that. And you have figures in historically accurate clothing, in a realistic setting. I mean, there's a great sense of naturalism and verisimilitude. And we have an actual moment of high drama, of moral drama. We have the winning gladiator turning to the crowd, watching them either go thumbs up or thumbs down. Apparently that's anachronistic, but we'll go with it. And he is looking for this gesture to see whether or not he should kill or spare the life of the defeated gladiator.
Yeah. Now I've got a little section on Jerome later, because in my opinion, he's probably on the top 10 artists of all time, in my opinion. And I'm going to try explain why later. But obviously, this is a very famous painting. But again, you can start to see some of the kind of academic tick boxes, the kind of hyper realism. I would say that this is probably the most realistic paintings that people have ever seen. Like in terms of like the kind of quality of painting, the poses, the shadows, the look at the light across here, the perspective's perfect. It has a real sumptuous effect that pulls you straight in.
Rich color.
Yeah, exactly. So you can immediately tell that kind of academic style. Secondly, like you said, it's a historical painting, but it's about drama and a moment. And what you'll find with a lot of the kind of more Roman academic stuff, it's about like someone being martyred or just like a tiny vignette in someone's life. But it's also I find it very interesting. And then also I think the scale of the paintings, they're often very large in kind of landscape, giving you lots of space to put stuff in. And we'll see that the Orientalists sort of pull away from some of those tropes into kind of more unique areas.
Yeah. So here we have Battle of the Pyramids. Okay. So in 1798, Napoleon led the conquest of Egypt, taking it from the Ottomans. I think I'm correct, Panama?
Yes. So Egypt at the time was an Ottoman possession. I believe it was also ruled by basically puppet kings. They had like sheiks and emirs that basically ran Egypt for them. And it would be one of those. I think it was the Muhammad Ali dynasty that went on to overthrow the Ottomans in Egypt. But I'd have to check in on that. But yes, and Napoleon storms into Egypt. I mean, I suppose some historians would say that it was a valid move, but I think it was quite harebrained. He takes a French army, which is still reeling from the aftermath of the terror and the revolution, decides he's going to land in Egypt, conquer the Middle East with this army, and then link up with somebody called Tipu in India, who was a sultan in southern India who was rebelling against the British there. So he wanted to kind of land there and then conquer his way east like Alexander, but actually go all the way. So I'm not sure how he would have ever really achieved this, but that was his apparent goal, to land in Egypt. Though he didn't get any further than sort of Jerusalem, Palestine nowadays. That's as far as he got. He got trapped in a lot of sieges. There were outbreaks of plague and horrible tropical ailments in the army because, of course, you've taken a bunch of French conscripts and bunged them in Egypt. So you're probably going to get that. Yes, and there was a great a battle fought between the forces of the Egyptians and the Ottomans and the French army at the pyramids, which Napoleon won. As you can see here, this was literally how it looked, I believe. You're just in front of the Great Pyramids.
Yeah. Yeah, so I believe that this campaign lasted from 1798 to 1801. And this painting was made by Antoine Jean Gros. You'll find that all the French painters have have at least two first names, so get used to that. So this is an example of historical painting. This is a military battle painting of Napoleon victorious at the pyramids outside Cairo. And this is seen as the beginning of Egyptology and the beginning of Orientalism proper as an academic subject. So when Napoleon went in, he took in a large number of, there were some draftsmen, there were some artists. Now, a lot of military campaigns included draftsmen because they needed good topographical drawings of the landscape and of various features so that they could orientate themselves and they could gather intelligence and they could plot things out, and they also had cartographers as well. So they were mapping as they were going and they were drawing, but there was also a conscious idea to record the ancient history of Egypt while they were there, because of course this was one of the great centers of civilization, and they were going to bring their empirical European enlightened view, and they were going to analyze and record in proper detail the glories of Egypt. So this is seen as the origin of Orientalism proper.
And in terms of like some of those things coming in, it's about the mystery of the East, and you can I love the kind of pyramids here. They're almost like a vision in the distance. Napoleon sort of like he's almost like saying he's turning his head away from them, but they're kind of appearing out of the smoke there. And then I have to love the detail on the saddle across here. This is obviously like an Oriental,
another great horse.
It's a great horse. I mean, I'm sure you can tell me more about this, but I'm pretty sure this has to be like an Oriental style. This is not standard French.
I think my guess upon seeing this now would be that it's a very artistically chosen. It looks to me like a sort of Persian satrap saddle. It looks like the sort of thing that a Persian conqueror would have worn. And I think that's very much on purpose. I think it is kind of, this painting in particular is trying to show Napoleon as almost like an heir to the great warlords of the Middle East of the past. With that, I mean, his horse looks rather like Bucephalus, I think. Alexander the Great's horse. So I think that may also be a deliberate. I mean, given that the aim of this campaign, as I said, was to literally sort of do what Alexander did, but do it better. I think that. Yes, that may be on purpose.
Yeah. So you've got those kind of like those big set pieces. You've got the kind of the fabrics, the sumptuousness. Look at the stirrups. Yeah. And I wonder whether these scimitars are also non-French standard.
Curved swords were standard for horse riding.
This is very curved.
Yeah.
This is very.
You have.
But that is very curved. Yeah.
You see,
straight swords get stuck in people.
Yeah, that's why you need a saber, which is curved.
Yeah, I do think these are native ones, but we need Semi-Agog because he would genuinely know. He would genuinely be able to tell me about it.
Or Lindy Beige.
Yeah, exactly.
If we can get Lindy Beige on this channel, then we'll have truly succeeded.
I will say. I won't say a word. And, yes.
And then you've got another kind of Oriental trope coming in. So you've obviously got the kind of the Nubian. I mean, we mentioned before when we were looking at some of the kind of other French art. The kind of was it on the Medusa, Raft of the Medusa? Yeah. There's another black man on there as well. But again, this is an opportunity to kind of create these interesting scenes. And also you see here the Oriental beauty here in the corner, the kind of exoticness. You can see she's kind of wearing kind of quite strong makeup, jewels in her hair. So it's that
with a much older man.
Yeah. You cannot get away from some of the kind of erotic undertones to this, and I think it walks I think a lot of Orientalism does walk a fine line between like pure Kumarism and the eros and the love of the body.
So you notice that's strange. It's not obvious at all, really, is it?
Well, I think I've got some paintings later where I think the line has definitely been crossed, and we're into British territory. But again,
Flashman.
Yeah, exactly. It's like British on tour as an artist. So there's all. I actually think that is the most challenging thing about Orientalism. It's nothing to do with the colonial aspect. It is because it's more like some of the paintings are bad because it's just a setup to create a scene with a beautiful young nude in, if that makes sense.
Although,
boo, Pharaoh the feminist. Boo.
I must point out that. Especially at this time and even now, the Middle East was a much more erotic place in terms of morality and openness than the West was. So I would posit, maybe perhaps if Apostolic Majesty hears this, he'll correct me, but I would posit that a Westerner touring the Middle East at this time would have constantly come across scenes similar to the ones depicted in these paintings. Obviously, they are very, kind of stylized, we might say, or perhaps cleaned up a little bit in the paintings. But this was a feature of life in the Middle East at this particular time. And of course, it's worth pointing out that the Ottoman Empire, in terms of its sexual morality, was rather like the West now, kind of an empire in its death throes. So there was a very lax enforcement on what would be considered proper Islamic codes of conduct. This was not like sort of modern day Wahhabist Islam being practiced here. This was a very, shall we say, liberal interpretation of that book.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not making a feminist point here. It's more like from an artistic perspective, it's kind of like it goes into what I would consider to be like more on the pornographic side.
We'll talk about this when the paintings come up.
Okay.
Let's
I will tell you whether I think they cross the line or not as we go along here.
Okay, so one of the grand results of the Orientalist project, the Egyptologist Project, was a description of Egypt, which was published in French between 1809 and 1829, came out in 23 volumes. They were very, very large. They were 100 centimeters by 81 centimeters, or 39 inches by 32 inches. These were massive volumes, and they had these sumptuous illustrations, and I'm sure that some of the collectors bought them basically for the illustrations. This was a grand catalogue. It was mapping. It was measuring monuments. It was looking at hieroglyphs. It was recording hieroglyphs. It was going into philology. So it was trying to this time they hadn't deciphered hieroglyphs. That came with the Rosetta Stone, but they were recording hieroglyphs. So they were attempting to decipher the language, and this was part of the great project of serious academic interest in wanting to understand the roots of the Orient and Egypt in particular. So we're just going to go through a few of these illustrations from these fantastic books. Now you can imagine. So this is a book that is it's 81 centimeters wide. You open it up and it's double that, and then some of them you have fold-out pages. So you're looking at a book that's as big as a kitchen table when it's open.
It's no surprise that they ended up having this kind of Near East Grand Tour, because the Grand Tours had something similar to this, which was kind of like it's almost like an old school guidebook. These massive like A1 size books where you have like pictures of the places to go and see. So what you've got with this already is like a shopping list of things an adventurer can go and see, or kind of point out to a guide and ask to go there, and they would know what to do. So it's interesting how this is so important in the development of this genre.
Yeah, and there was a huge outburst of these travel books in the Georgian period, especially with these grand illustrations, especially large scale. I mean, many of them were large scale, especially for these illustrations, because you didn't need it for the text. The text could be at any size. But this was flourished, and this became partly because of the technical advance of aquatint, which allowed you to do shading in printmaking, which you couldn't do with, it was more time consuming, and it was less persuasive if you did it with hatching or cross hatching or stippling. So hatching is lines, cross hatching is lines in two directions, stippling is with dots. Aquatint actually allowed you to do sort of shades of grey, so you could go everything up from black through to pure white. And I think I'm not sure if these are in aquatint, but this is something we might talk about in a future stream. But this is something that this is technology. So this is something that Dee mentioned in our stream with AA, where the technology allowed artists to do new things, and it's the advent of the aquatint alongside the colonialist project of mapping and recording that led to these explosion of these gigantic books with the sumptuous illustrations.
And that's tied into what I said in my talk at the event with aesthetic technology with more aesthetic potential. There you go. This is what we need more of.
Yep.
Anyway,
so this is just a plan of one of the buildings there. And I think this is hand colored. There were color prints, but they were very, very expensive and very technically difficult to do. I think this has just been hand colored. So what you have is a print, and then you just get a journeyman artist who to basically color it with watercolors. And this is an invented scene, so it's sort of like they've sort of compiled this out of various views and elements. So this is just a fantastic scene. This was one of the frontispieces, so it was just meant as a sort of an introduction to what was inside.
Mm.
Right, so here we have the first Orientalist art as such. So this is by Charles Cordier, French Orientalist. He lived from 1827 to 1905. So this is woman from the French colonies. I'm presuming this would actually probably be from the West Indies, or well, not necessarily. It might be Senegal or something. But anyway, this is from 1861, and this is made of bronze and marble. And the earring, I think, must be sort of gold or brass.
Yeah, gold and lapis. Yeah.
With lapis, yeah. So this is a beautiful example of not just polychromy. Polychromy is when you have statues which are many colored, and this could mean painted sculptures, but here it actually means sculpture which is made of different materials and then constructed together. It's much more difficult than actually making a statue in one color and then painting it. So here you have the bronze, which forms the skin and the sort of the negligee, the undergarment, and the armband, and then you have the beautiful marble, making this sort of beautiful, exquisite drapery. And these are quite fantastic when you see them in real life. I've seen them in this one's in the Metropolitan, but there are examples elsewhere.
Yeah, like because if you see like late Roman busts, they do the polychromy with two different marbles.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see. I need to look into when the bronze came in, because that is quite yes, it's a spectacular piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a relatively late. I think it's a sort of 18th or 19th century. It's very tricky to do. Yeah. So here's Charles Gleyer's portrait from 1834. Any thoughts on who this might be?
A Frenchman himself.
Ooh, close. Actually, it's of John Lowell, who is an American who did the Grand Tour, as you've been talking. And here he is dressed up in of Ottoman costume, I presume. And this was something that was very, very common. You had people who wanted to get painted in the local garb while they were there. Charles Gleyer was a French Orientalist, and he travelled with John Lowell around the Near East and painted him. And what you'll find is often, I think, but you're going to talk about this later, that you have the Orientalists, they go there, they do lots of sketches on scene in watercolor and pencil in their sketchbooks. They do small stuff, and then they come back to their studio in Paris mainly. Yep. And then that's where they do their paintings. They do their oil paintings there, and they often take lots of props and lots of costumes, and they get models to dress up in the studio so they can get it absolutely right.
Yeah, and the props are key, because again, I think it adds a lot of authenticity to it, because they've got entire outfits, they've got bits of furniture, etc. And whenever you see a bit of furniture which has been placed up front, you know that it has been taken as a prop, if that makes sense, because he's trying to kind of showcase it. But I mean, there was some on-site painting, again, like Hunt in particular painted in the locations that he he was taking from at the same time. And I know that Jerome did do like, his sketches were pretty good, like they were pretty close to the finished product on site, and then he just spent, because again with oils it's about the detailing and blending and shading, etc., that just takes ages. So he got to a pretty good level in the local area. So again, I think whenever I've heard people talk about Orientalism, there's one of the criticisms is this, it's not done in the location. They're just using local models.
So, sorry, he didn't paint his giant oil painting on canvas out in the desert. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I just have to say before I forget, somebody has asked in the previous picture of the statue, what was the blue stone in the earring? Somebody asked.
Probably lapis lazuli, which is the blue stone from Afghanistan.
Yes.
There you go. And maybe some turquoise there.
Yeah.
Or like there's this like Egyptian glaze which has a similar color.
Yeah, so there's Egyptian blue, which is actually a color in itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So here we have a painting from 1885. I get up my list here. So we're looking at these in sort of thematic sections. So here we get into religion. This is Jerome again, one of our favorites. Prayer in Cairo in 1865. So there's obviously the Orientalists are interested in capturing things which are unique to the Orient, and so at this time, of course, Islam was unique to the Orient. Not exclusively Islam, because there will also not so much in this stream, but I think maybe in other streams we'll see sort of paintings of sort of Armenian Christians in Jerusalem and so forth.
Plenty of Jews all over the place too.
Plenty of Jews, yes.
We have a Jew section later. I believe
we have a Jewish ghetto indeed. So prayer in Cairo.
Alex is the spicy one. No, he's going to get the stream down now.
Just using ghetto in its proper term. So, as Ferro said right at the beginning, the Orientalists are far from always hostile or always critical. They are actually very favorably disposed towards Islam, and there is a great sort of Islamophilia amongst the upper class. I think especially sort of Byron and wasn't it Jefferson or one of the American founding fathers who was a big Islamophile. But anyway, there's a lot of respect for Islam. Yeah. And so you get, and one of the typical scenes, of course, that Orientalists would paint was they would paint Muslims at prayer, almost exclusively men, of course, because they couldn't gain access to view the women at prayer.
Yeah.
Haram.
And yes, so here you have a beautiful scene of. I think this is a very romanticized and prettified view of Cairo. I know it isn't. I know it wasn't as ugly then as it is now, but even so, I think this is probably a slightly sort of picturesque version.
He's definitely edited the landscape there, and obviously that the crescent moon coming in there would definitely not be. Right, I was just trying to think, because if they're in Egypt, they'll be praying south. So I'm not sure whether that's
not south, southeast.
Yeah,
roughly, yeah. Mecca is southeast of Cairo,
or east southeast. Yeah.
Although I suppose would that be sort of an element of romanticism then, adding in the crescent moon as a kind of
definitely
a symbol of Islam.
And again, I think they kind of hit the misty landscape again, just like and again the minaret as almost like that pyramidic style structure. People would know the minarets; they can see the kind of mosque in the distance. So again, it's this mystic, mystic culture that you're getting a glance in. It's something that you would have heard whispers of back home in France or in England. But you get to see it in practice, and I think it's a very beautiful and very very venerable. You've got kind of like the old men there,
very very dignified painting. It's very respectful.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very nice, and I think Jerome's captured this, or created, I should say, wonderful moment of kind of reflection and earnestness. I'm pretty sure this is wrong, because you're all meant to pray together at the same time, aren't you?
Yes.
That's
what I've seen anyway.
I think there is a specific, but maybe again I don't know, there's a specific sect or whatever. But my understanding is that you get more.
I also didn't know that they prayed on the roof. I always thought the praying was done inside, but perhaps this was a thing of the time. I don't know.
I wonder if it's the morning prayer, first thing in the morning.
Maybe.
Or also it could just be the roof
night
of a
of
building,
blessing.
so they're not actually at a mosque; they're just on a roof at a building. So they couldn't necessarily all fit in a mosque, so that they were praying on a rooftop.
Isn't it traditionally that prayers are done at home, and then on Friday everybody goes to the mosque, or thereabouts?
But
Yes.
I think a lot has changed though since the 19th century Ottoman interpretation. But I have to mention, as you mentioned, Tim, the Byron in the Greek outfit. Because it's funny just because he is like an early Orientalist basically, and I do wonder if some of this tradition of like LARPing as like the level or whatever.
Well, you say LARP, but he did go and die in the Greek uprising.
Yes, that's pretty intense LARPing.
Yeah,
I mean that's the best.
Oh boy,
you're such a millennial, Pharaoh.
Oh, sorry.
Or Gen X.
This is how Pharaoh's going to arrive to the next event. I think is dressed like this.
I would love to dress like this.
Yeah, we should all have turned up like this, and AA was the only one who didn't turn up like that, and we'd all be laughing and pointing at him.
I have to say the Greco-Ottoman style of the double pistols in the kind of pistol holder is it's an amazing look. It's we can see it here in the. 1 second, I've got to load it up again. This here. Again, I'm sure Semir God can tell me the proper name. They have this like Ottoman-style pistol braces belt where you've got 2 pistols either side, sometimes a sword. It's just a brilliant look that was lost forever.
I do like that they brought their pistols to the prayers with them. Pray with those.
There you can see the sword there. They have a special hilt, which is kind of like. I know it's almost like a cobra's head almost. You'll see it again. But again, I imagine that's a prop that they've.
Gisile muskets too, very big feature in Orientalist paintings.
Yeah. So we have another Jerome painting, Prayer in the Mosque, 1871, around 1871. Yeah.
Again, Farah, I'm starting to see what you mean with the enormous array of weaponry just stuffed into the front belt there.
Because that's going to fall out when he bends over.
Well, again, and all of the pistols are just so beautifully made, and there's so much detailing to them. I think it's because you can fire one and then you can immediately fire the second one.
Yes.
But again, this is just pure Ottoman influence from the elites. And there you got everyone else lined up across here.
Jerome did go to the Middle East. He did spend a fair amount of time in Cairo, and he went to Istanbul, I believe, as well.
He did the full tour, went to Damascus. There's the mihrab on the Qibla wall. But again, just look at the detail. The detail. You've got a great selection of people. A brilliant moment. I mean, how is this negative against Islam or
exactly? I mean, imagine being a Western painter who's probably seen like Paris and some towns outside of Paris, and then you just arrive at this. I mean, like, can you what that must have felt like to just rock up and see this? I mean, there's no wonder these tours were so popular.
For context, of course, this is the forgotten. When we were doing our stream with AA, and we're talking about the way that realism is kind of left out of the modern art story, you'll see the story of modern art, and then there's just no place for academic art. There's no place for Orientalist art, and this was painted at around the same time that Monet was doing his haystack paintings and his cathedral paintings and so on. And this is the sort of thing that you won't find in most art history books.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been written out.
I think it may also be important to mention that this particularly colorful and rich, I want to say, stripe of Islamic practice has largely died due to the Wahhabist movement, which was originated by an Arab philosopher in present-day Saudi Arabia, I think, in the late 1700s. And by this point hadn't caught on in places like Egypt. And it would, of course, sweep through the Middle East later than this period, and is why now all Muslims that you see are very sort of austere and dour, and they would not worship in a place like this, and also not in garments like these, and with
Yeah.
sort of expansive and well-made rugs and things. It would not look like this now. In the Middle East.
Just on the outfits. So there's if you see like people. I mean, I'm in London, so you see it quite a lot. People going off to Islamic school or whatever on a Saturday, they'll be dressed in like a white robe, basically, and that's the Saudi Wahhabist recommendation for the outfit. And then for Pakistan, for example, is a black robe traditionally. But you can see here in the reality was in the 19th century, there are these kind of rich and sumptuous silks, like the Ottomans were known for some of the most beautiful velvets and outfits in the world. Again, you can see the silks coming through here, and I think that only added to the that kind of impact, like you said, the kind of culture shock.
Yes.
Going from like just imagine you're like an austere Anglican or or I mean, or Catholics probably not too bad. They love a bit of bling, but to seeing this would have been quite shocking. You know, everyone wearing their best outfits. But again, I have a, Islam needs to return to sumptuous Egyptian version of Islam, basically. I think.
So would that appear to be a slave figure on the left there?
This guy here, not sure.
No, I think it's probably more an ascetic. Ascetic,
perhaps. Yeah.
There's lots of like Sufi-esque groups, because again in Ipswich, in Egypt.
Easily confused.
Nowadays. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
It's been a long day. There are various sects of Shia where you have to.
In Ipswich.
In Ipswich, exactly. Watch out for the Sufi sects in Ipswich. Yeah.
Walking around in their loincloths.
Anyway, moving on.
Before. Yes. So this is the Fanatics of Tangier. So this is painted by Delacroix. Delacroix is one of the most famous Orientalists. He paints in a slightly different style to Gérôme, so it's less realistic. He's a romantic artist, so there's more distortion of form, there's more clashing color, there's more movement. It's slightly looser painted. So this is the Fanatics of Tangier. So basically, as far as I can gather, this was a scene that he saw while he was in Tangier. And it was dervishes, basically Sufi mystics, who had worked themselves into paroxysms following Friday prayers, and they sort of charged down the streets in Tangiers and were watched by the general population. And this was something that he saw in his, I think it's 1835 visit to Tangier. He also visited Algeria. So Algeria became a French possession in 1830. There was a sort of a military alliance thing with Morocco, and he also visited Morocco in the 1830s. And this was done from memory with a little bit of alteration after he came back to France.
Very nice. I mean, obviously, Delacroix style's kind of looser, but then that gives it a kind of a dynamism and a energy to it, which is quite useful, especially when you're doing these kind of characters here. But I think it's very, very powerful. Very cool.
All right, so we're onto the theme of the desert, the land. Now, of course, the land is very much part of discussions of writers and thinkers in the 19th century. There was this idea that the land and the nation, that is the people from the land, that the people were formed by the character of the land. So, that the Russians were the way they were because of the land, and the Persians because of the sort of the comfort and the indolence and the pleasant climate of Persia and so forth. And that was what made them indolent and soft. So you have also these, particularly with ladylike hands. I'm led to believe that's a trait of the Persian.
Yes, great shame in Persia.
Great shame, yeah. So and so there's this idea that the people are formed by the land, and there is this characterization of this. It's kind of caricature. The Orientalists and the post-colonialists will say that this is sort of a hard and fast rule. It's not hard and fast, but it is quite good in the think that you would think of the West as logical, male, materialistic. You think of the East as decadent, soft, feminine, emotional. And so this is a scene by Gustave Guillaume, 1840 to 1887, and this is the desert of 1867, showing the harshness of the desert.
Yeah, and you've obviously got the kind of like the death, and then the caravan in the back, and again, it's just kind of like you're only yards away from destruction, and it's about knowledge. And again, just think about how these kind of figures in the distance are kind of almost melded into the horizon as well. So you're getting that kind of the feeling of space and distance, but also again that kind of mysticism and adventure that's going on.
I think this. I mean, it's worth bringing up while we got this painting up. I was listening to a stream the other week by Morgoth and Endeavour on Lawrence of Arabia. And they were talking about. I mean, this could be like a shot from that film, basically. And they were talking about how, although the film has been like trashed by Western academics and condemned as an imperialist Orientalist film or whatever, because you've got the great scenes of the desert and the exotic Arabs, and the king is played by Alec Guinness and this sort of thing. In actual fact, it portrays the Arabs very favorably.
Better than the British. Better than the British, for sure.
Yes, better than the British. And of course, people say, "Oh, but they just portray them as a load of, in fighting tribesmen." And well, of course, that's what it was like then. And and the other thing is that it portrays them as very masculine and very wise and very defensive of their peoples and their traditions, and not easily fooled. These are not characters that are in any way really negatively or inaccurately portrayed. And they pointed out that you've got beautiful depictions like this, or like some of the depictions in that film. Compare that to what a Western academic would make of the Middle East now, where they make them into these like peace-loving, sort of hippie types before the imperialists show up. Peace-loving and we're oppressed by the evil white men, and this sort of thing. That's a far more insulting portrayal of the Arab world, I think, than the ones that the Orientalists artworks and films like Lawrence of Arabia give off. I think that in a sense the Western academics are committing logical error, but of course, as I mentioned at the start of the stream, these are not people actually interested in favorable or realistic portrayals of the Middle East. They're only interested in power. So again.
So this is the Salt Caravan. I have. Oh, by the way, if anyone's interested in Orientalism, there's a good catalogue I can recommend, which is the 1984 catalogue. So I'll just get to that. So this is the 1984 catalogue from the Royal Academy. It's called The Orientalists, and you can pick it up secondhand for not very much. And they talk, and this is actually a catalogue entry for this painting that was exhibited in 1984. They say salt was by no means a rare commodity in Algeria, but because of transportation difficulties, usually served only local requirements. They talk about there was sources of salt in lake beds that were transported by camel to the coast. So that's what this painting is.
Yeah, and I guess I think we underestimate the importance of the caravan in that kind of culture, or certainly more on the kind of Jerusalem and that kind of super Near East side. I'm not sure about North Africa. As like every, it's the most traditional transport they would have used going back to the Silk Road, and filial as well, isn't it? It's kind of like your family's going with you, and it's your possessions, your moving possessions.
So I think what this does is this shows the idea that the Western painters or the Western thinkers always thought of the East as indolent and lazy and lacking resourcefulness and hardiness. It's not at all borne out by the evidence of these paintings. They're showing them as being quite resourceful, of being practical, of being sort of tough in terms of, sort of commercially tough, physically tough. So I think that these paintings are kind of dispelling a lot of the things that Edward Said and other critics of Orientalists have put forward.
For sure, and again, yeah, they look great, and again, I think it's interesting seeing some of the colours being used in the desert landscape, because again, when I think of kind of 19th century landscape, it's impressionists where they're kind of using kind of quite bold magentas and blues, but there is sort of some of that inside here as well. You can see this kind of like bluish hints in the
purple lakes, carmines and stuff.
Exactly,
yeah.
Like maybe they don't have some of the kind of the pigments and stuff, but I wonder whether some of that feel came out of this. I mean, that's just a random hypothesis.
Okay, so now we're into the Jewish ghetto. So one of the interests of the Orientalists were they were interested in the Arabs because it was seen as like a throwback to this ancient society. It was a medieval society that had existed relatively unchanged and so forth. And that was obviously not entirely true, but of course they were going back there and they're seeing relatively primitive technology and traditional clothing and local customs. So they could say to themselves, well, this is more authentic. And they were particularly interested in the Jews of North Africa, because of course this was like an insight into how they thought of the Old Testament. So, of course, they were being profoundly religious. They were excited to discover the Jews of the Near East and North Africa, because it gave them some sort of insight into the conditions and the customs and the appearances of Christ's time, of the Old Testament and Christ's time. So that's why they were very interested in depicting Jews. Also, Western artists had a great problem in accessing Islamic women, because of course it was against Islamic custom, but they could get access to Jewish women as models. So this is why they were very interested in painting Jewish women, because they couldn't have access to most Muslim women unless they were prostitutes. So that's why you see often paintings of sort of people in Arab get-up, women in Arab get-up that were not actually Muslims. They were actually Jews who were either dressed as Arabs, as Arab Muslims, or were wearing sort of costumes or so forth, because the painters couldn't have access to Muslim models. By the way, this is by Cordier again.
Yeah. I wonder if it's slightly easier for some of those audiences to understand as well, like facially, because again, they just look more Western, don't they? But you've got obviously kind of got the attire here, the kind of beautiful kind of flower work, flower lace being translated into to bronze there. Again, the kind of use of natural stone and coral and stuff in the headdress. Again, I've not seen this kind of stuff, this Cordier stuff before, but I need to check him out more, because these are some exceptional bits of sculpture. I think really, really, really beautiful, and I think they're adding a little bit of beauty here. It's always that interplay between the kind of revealed and hidden. You've got all of these layers and wraps of clothes, and then just this kind of beautiful kind of waves of hair peeking out, and just a little bit of the top part of the chest there. So it's kind of trying to make it more tantalizing through the use of clothing as well, I think. So very nice.
This is Jewish Wedding, 1837 to 41, painted by Delacroix again. So Delacroix wrote of visiting a Jewish wedding. I'm not sure if it was in Algiers or Tangiers. And he described it very with a lot of detail in his journal, which you can find. I don't have the copy of the journal to hand, but I've read it. And he also did watercolor sketches of some of the people there, particularly the costumes. And this is painted afterwards when he came back to his Paris home. And so this is one of the things that he couldn't really get access to in an Islamic setting. So this was a Jewish wedding. Yeah.
You can see, I think she's literally wearing the same kind of headdress as here as well, which is very, very nice.
Yeah.
Also, something that I love about Middle Eastern and Afghan architecture is all these larger houses with these enclosed or sort of half enclosed courtyards. I think it is a really nice, because they have it in Spain as well, don't they?
Yes.
It's kind of quite. I mean,
although partly comes from the Moors.
Yes, of course. And I suppose, is it to do with heat or ventilation?
Yeah, it's what you do is you enclose it so you've got a shaded area. You do have circulation of air, but you don't have so much direct sunlight because you have the sort of wells. So you're surrounded on all sides by walls, so you don't have so much direct sunlight, but the air can circulate. And also, if you open, and also if you go to an old Spanish house, you'll find that the doors and the windows have these very elaborate multi-part shutters and windows and screens and so forth. So you can open them and open them in a particular way that lets through air, but not light. Lets through light and not air and whatever and so forth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Delacroix again, death of Sardanapalus. Sardanapalus was an Oriental despot, and he was defeated. And so he said, well, as I'm defeated, I'm going to be defeated. I'm going to commit suicide, and I'm going to have my animals, my slaves, and my harem put to death.
I think he actually was Persian. I've seen this, and it's again
Persian. Okay.
I mean, just look at any resemblance. That's all I'm saying. To how ladylike are these hands?
Yeah.
We must compare.
No Tupperware in this scene.
This is AA.
He's definitely not wearing a tie, so it must be AA.
Yeah, exactly.
This is AA ordering the death of Women's Hour after they got more views than Cigar Stream.
There's Saffron, there's Dina, there's Birdie. Oh dear,
exactly.
What's a massacre?
I've seen this. It's a truly wonderful painting. It's really good, and you've got this kind of indifferent look by this luxurious king. It's just so casual as this wholesale slaughter going on. Again, this angry ginger.
It's Lambda.
Yeah. I wonder who that could be.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes. And again, I was mentioning the kind of humor versus erotic here. This is obviously on the kind of erotic and very, very tasteful, I would say. Delacroix has managed to hide all the nipples with the positions. I think his work's very tame, but it allows you to kind of show the female form in a very beautiful way. So it's that combination of beauty and destruction. There's the opulence and death at the same time, and that's what makes it such a horrific painting. You've kind of got this almost kind of raped figure in the background. The kind of the dark eyes. It's some very dark. Again, with the background and stuff, it is very like muddy and
it's very
blended.
Indistinct. It's sort of abstract, really.
Yeah, so it gives it like an almost dreamlike quality that, and again, some of the figures are quite nightmarish. Again, this is like his hat is making him kind of almost snake-like. Mm-hmm. You've got this kind of ghoulish man with red eyes across here as well. I mean, I would say that this is definitely on the not realistic. Or not accurate, where I think he's just taken a few props and stuff to make it look a bit Persian, and the rest is a fantasy. You've got these kind of ridiculous peacock headdresses, which I'm sure aren't real. But I've really liked this painting. So
right, so here is the Lion Hunt from 1855. I believe Delacroix he saw hunters. He may not actually have gone on a lion hunt itself. There were actually lions at this time in North Africa. They've been made extinct. They died off in the 1960s, sadly. I mean, and this was actually a distinct species, the Barbary lion, which was made extinct, sadly. So here we have the lion hunt. So we have the drama. We have the bravery, because you had to be pretty brave to kill a lion with a sword. So this was seen as sort of like as a noble tradition. Delacroix was very interested in horses. He was very interested in animals and action, of course. So this was a typical scene. This was an ideal scene for him.
Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to zoom in, but I can't.
Hunting a lion, as you say, with a sword from horseback. I mean, that's got to take some balls. I mean, you know, given this isn't like hunting a fox, is it? The lion could quite easily just, you know, maul you, as is going on in this picture, with these fellas on the ground.
Yeah. So it was a real test. It was a real test of manhood to actually engage in these hunts.
Just talking artistically again, it's a real test of composition to do something like this, because it's I've tried to draw several lions eating horses, because it's a famous archetype of Stubbs. He does a lot. He has like an entire series of horses and lions, and it's so hard to find good reference photos for lions.
Of lions eating horses.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, or like, because when they jump up, they don't really curve round in the same kind of way. So I'm sure he must have like spent some time like observing them. And you've got a really beautiful composition here. This almost like triangle here, but it also gives you a chance of the opportunity to put horses in specific positions which are a bit unique. So you've got this horse kind of collapsed here at the floor, that kind of beautiful hoof coming out, the horse rampant across here, and then the horse from sort of 3/4 from behind. So he's just used this kind of idea as a way to kind of showcase his skill as a painter, but then just look at the faces and stuff that's going on. It's really reminds me. There's a lot of there's some very famous North African Roman hunting mosaics, and I do wonder whether he bumped into some of them during his trip to Morocco, because just look where people are looking. It's all over the place. This lion's mauling this guy, but he's looking up at this guy. This guy's stabbing the lion, he's looking and they're having a little moment across here. So you get that feel of battle and chaos at the same time, and it's just handled so nicely. So another really great painting.
All right. So on the subject of savagery, we have a scene of execution. So this is Henri Regnault, who died in 1871. He actually died during the Franco-Prussian War, Franco-Prussian War of 1871. And this is execution without hearing under the Moorish kings, painted in 1870. So it's pretty much his last picture. And this shows the execution of a man, which I'm sure they probably didn't do in the interior. I think they probably did this outside. But
probably a special place for executions, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I wonder what. Sorry. So this was seen as an archetype of Islamic severity and brutality, and also the opulence of the setting. I'm not sure about that though, because the French literally executed people with a guillotine still, didn't they? So that's basically the same. I guess you could say that the guillotine is more efficient, whatever. So, but it
was designed to be scientific.
Yeah, I mean there is this kind of brutality to it, from just like the blood splatter, etc. And again, it is an imposing figure. The way he's done it's kind of like in a long form portrait. So you've got this verticalism, you've got the kind of lengths of the folds of the robes looking upwards, making him seem more like he's towering over you. Basically, you're positioned at the bottom of the steps, looking up. So he's got that kind of force and authority, but I don't necessarily feel like it's like done in like in a savagery kind of way, but more kind of like he's just this dark and powerful figure. Because again, behind him is like this, almost like the symbols of Islam as well. I feel like it's like this is all about power. You can see all the, I think they're called murkabs or something. These kind of hollowed caves, roof features you see on the ceilings of Al-Andalus. I wonder, what's the palace called again? Is it not Almeria?
Alhambra.
Alhambra, yes, yeah, because this isn't. It'll be in. You said it was Granada, wasn't it? So,
well, no, it's Moorish. It's not necessarily Alhambra, but it could be.
Yeah, but so you've got this kind of the kind of opulence, this almost kind of like authority to it. So that's how I feel like. I think if you depict that, there is maybe a bit of a savageness to it through kind of the blood splatter, but again, I don't necessarily buy into that. But yeah, any thoughts, Panama?
I mean, I'm quite interested in what the depiction of this central executioner figure, because he's obviously depicted a lot darker than you would expect for, say, an Arab. So he appears to be a kind of Berber. Oh, it says, yeah, that he's a Moor, king of Granada. Yes, I mean, the style of the way he's dressed seems perhaps a little bit fanciful. I mean, unless this is, I mean, I may very well be wrong. I don't really know anything about Moorish clothes, but it does seem a little bit romantic.
You know what? I wonder if this is like a history thing, because Granada was conquered in 1600 by the Spanish. So I wonder if this is like a historical Orientalism as well. So it's like this is a medieval. So maybe that's why it is, because it's not meant to be like a accurate portrayal. Okay.
So this is
what section are we in now? Sorry, is this like
this is the savagery section?
Okay. This is
yeah. So we've done the Jewish ghetto. Now we're in the savagery section. So this is the head of rebel beys in Cairo, 1866, by Jerome again. So this is something that would have been seen as, I mean, the execution by beheading, of course, was still practiced in France in 1870s. So that wouldn't necessarily be seen as savage, but I think sort of the display of the public display of heads might be seen as harking back to an earlier time.
Yes. Also, the beys were, I think it's the lowest ranking member of the Ottoman nobility. So a bey is traditionally somebody who is in charge of a province. So, like, you'd have the Bey of Egypt or the Bey of Tripoli, So yes, that's, rebellious heads of provinces there. Up against all. I mean, as I think, like the last one, this is a very sort of historical one. You've got this man in what appears to be chainmail and sort of cloth and armor, and that very stark orangey red through the door seems to me quite to suggest a kind of slightly more brutal edge to the painting. It seems the introduction of those colors.
I mean, the doorway and death. You're passing into like another realm, maybe even to hell, like you said, with some of the kind of orangey flavors. I think the savageness is this little guy across here. The fact that he's just chowing down on this fat pipe while he's surrounded by the heads of his enemies. I mean, that's literally the definition of savageness. It's a job, Pharaoh.
It's execution. It's just a job. It's just a job.
I dream to be this guy with the heads of my enemies next to me like that, and I just don't care. I'm not saying I did not say that, Panama. But again, I think another lovely painting by Jerome.
Pistols in his belt too.
Yeah.
Right, so now we're getting to slightly even more spicy territory. So this is Abduction of the Herzegovinian Woman, 1861, by a Czech painter called Jaroslav Čermák. And yeah, so the Barbary Pirates. I think that when people discuss slavery, especially in the West and especially in America, they only think of the North Africa, the North Atlantic slave trade, with West African slaves being taken to North America and the Caribbean. Not the full story. The Barbary slave trade was basically, I think it was something that spurred the first act of American foreign policy. Was basically the naval attack on the Barbary shore by I'm not sure if it was actually an attack or a diplomatic move by the Americans in order to prevent the Barbary slave traders raiding Europe, Mediterranean countries, and north up to and including the British Isles. So that included the capturing of women, the murdering of men, and the enslavement of children, taking them back to Arab lands to be sold as slaves and concubines. And this was a real thing that happened. And obviously this was quite on the mind of the people who lived under the Ottoman Empire. So the Czechs were just outside the borders, but Herzegovina, which is obviously in Bosnia, was very much within the realm of the Ottomans. So this was quite a live topic and quite a provocative image.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's is it the millet system as well? Is that right? Where they steal the children of Balkan folk to raise as part of janissaries?
Yes,
maybe. Yeah.
They there was a whole thing in the Ottoman court as well where so slaves would be brought in to actually raise so slaves would very often actually give birth to royal heirs on the auspices of the ruling men, and then those children would also be brought up by slaves. So there was this weird kind of system in which slavery was bizarrely integral to the Ottoman way of life. And so hence there were indeed many scenes like this, which were, I mean, I doubt it was quite so picturesque. But you know, this was a very common thing. Women being stolen, women and men and children being stolen from all around the corners of the empire and brought back for slavery, basically.
And you see the dead father and the dead child.
Yeah, the dead child.
Either side. I was led to believe that the line "the British will never be slaves" in Rule Britannia comes from the Barbary pirates, and
quite possibly,
because again they raided all the way down to Cornwall. So anyway,
they did. Yes, the Barbary pirates were a great. I think it was the United States' first international war was actually against the Barbary pirates. Because they were such a trouble. They were such a menace to peaceful civilization.
Yeah.
Just going to the painting. I mean, when you're talking about like a nude like this, it's obviously quite shocking. There is a classical precedent through the rape of the Sabine women, and again, her pose is straight out of that. And again, if you see that, there's many sculptural works where you've got a Sabine, a Roman grabbing her. And then like a man, like a male Sabine below. So I think the pose is already from that. But there's what I think is quite good is, like you said, the man face down, but he's holding on. You can see the kind of stiffness in his hand onto.
He went down fighting.
Yeah, exactly. He's holding onto the clothes of his wife, desperately holding onto her. You can see the kind of the fat, podgy child. Very young, very healthy still.
Cherubic.
Murdered unnecessarily. And then not only has she been taken away, but she's been derobed, we can see here. So she's taking that privacy away. She's being manacled by this faceless figure. It's interesting how two of the three characters have had their faces turned away, and it's making it a little bit kind of more like as that kind of unknown threat. And then you've got this kind of main guy here who just looks indifferent. This is his day job, is just like grabbing women and raping them and stealing them away.
Basically.
And then I just love the expression in her face is just this shock and fear and horror, and she's looking directly at you. You know,
it's an appeal, yes.
Yeah, and it's just that her right eye has just got a little glint in it. Just put just a single dot of white paint there. And it makes you zoom in from afar, and I think that makes it a very
visceral piece.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got this kind of combination of like the blue sky and then the kind of green as well, like in contrast to the kind of the black clouds of smoke and the red fire
and the earthen tones and the reds of the attackers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's almost kind of like nature versus man there as well. They're kind of wearing these kind of creatures from the underworld, but no, very horrific and sad, but poignant painting.
So, gentlemen, this is what you tuned in for.
Yep, the most famous one, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is Jerome, the slave market from 1866. There is, of course, this great difference, very shocking dichotomy of the elderly, dark-skinned Arab Muslim and the white-skinned female Christian clothed. They're clothed and she's not clothed. And this is obviously a great way of representing the differences between the different cultures. Yes.
And again, I would stress that as much as this has come to be kind of seen as a cliche by certain academics, I'm very much of the opinion that had you have gone to a slave marketplace of this time, that as Jerome would have done, this is what you would have seen. I mean, you would have seen slaves of all classes and all types. This is clearly a very, very high price, high quality person being sold here. I mean, you know, as callous as terms are to put it in, that is what's happening here. And you can see, I mean, I believe that Jerome actually saw this because he's got certain details about the trading of slaves in the Middle East that I think you would have had to have actually gone there at the time to know. For example, the checking of the teeth. The buyer is making sure that the slave has a complete set of teeth, which was a commonly done thing. And
yes, that's what they did with tracking with horses.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, this is it seems accurate to me anyway.
Yeah. I think just in terms of kind of layout, I think it's meant to be shocking for a couple of reasons. Firstly, this is a busy place, so you can see all the people in the background, and no one's bothered at all. They're just kind of wandering along. Like you can see that there's another Nubian hair being sold on. There's women on the floor. Again, maybe there's another African woman here.
Yeah.
Well, of course, she could be a slave, maybe. So this is just like it's commonplace. So again, there's that shock factor. Then you have this kind of like, again, checking of the teeth. So again, there's the analogy to the horse, but there's also something like obviously about that kind of penetration as well. Yeah. And again, the kind of holding on the hand and the control. And then like if you see her pose, she has got this almost kind of contrapposto classical pose to her. She's the weight is being held on one of the legs, so this is almost classical. But then you see the arms, and they kind of like dropped down to the side. The face just looks dead and defeated, and so it's almost kind of like some kind of dark version of a Venus. You know, this it's meant to be like this beautiful woman with the kind of classical pose, but you know, she's again, she's just sort of dead inside. There's no life to her, represented by the arms and the face.
It could even be the woman from the previous painting, in a sense, you know.
The next stage.
Exactly. And then I think he just gets, like you said, all of the details correct here. You know, it's obviously like a like a Romanesque column, which will probably be reused in one of the
Yeah.
So this is like North Africa or something. So this maybe sort of Tangiers or whatever.
And of course, the really terrible thing is that, of course, this basically still happens now in a great many places in the Middle East that veiled under protection, particularly in Libya post Gaddafi. That's one of the marks of the neocon policy, is that after they got rid of him, slavery flourished again, as it had done for millennia in the region. So, that you may end up if you went to Libya for whatever reason, you may wander into a marketplace and actually see this taking place. Still.
But yeah, just talking about some of the kind of tones he's used as well. There's a darkness and a shadow to it, and again, I think it's not a bright painting. A lot of the characters are kind of being pushed back through their kind of saturation, quite low saturation. The roofs collapse. There's kind of plants growing across. So again, there's this kind of ancientness to it, but also decline and sadness to it. And again, the kind of most bright things are the kind of buyers. Again, the fact that they're masked gives them a bit of a mysterious quality to them. And again, I love the expression of the youth here, where again, it's not really of desire. Do you know what I'm saying? He's not looking at this woman with kind of like you're beautiful. There's like a sad. It's almost they're trading meat. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
there's no human value here. And I have to ask you both from a kind of technical point of view. So how's the painter achieved this effect of having this kind of washed out background and yet these kind of highlighted characters in the foreground? Is this
what he's using is halftones. So halftones are where you're blending different colors so they don't stand out so much. You're also you're blending it with darker colors, sometimes with black, other times with sort of browns or grays, and that mutes them and that sort of suppresses the brightness. And so what you do is you'd apply that to everything in the background, including the buildings and the figures, and then you would have the foreground figures painted in sort of more clear tones with fewer halftones.
I see.
Yeah. And also with sharper lighting.
Just noticed this little bad boy, like dead dog, mangy dog on the floor. He's
just
very sad.
Seen too much. He's having a kip. He's just,
and again, the clothes discarded on the floor. It's very
rags. Yeah.
Very dark painting. Very dark.
So this is Otto Pliny, who's a Swiss painter. This is the slave market from around 1910. So just as Picasso was in the throes of analytical cubism, you have the final dying flourish of the romantic genre, well, the academic genre, which is basically extinguished in 1914 with the outbreak of the First World War. And so this is one of the last paintings, the last true Orientalist paintings before the Great War kind of ends academic painting, basically.
Yes.
I think this goes into Combe territory right there. This is
sentimentalism.
Again, just compare like Jerome with this kind of like I mean she's voluptuous, but again like the sadness makes it makes it okay.
It's not meant to titillate.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's the kind of like the light fabric across there,
and that the pose as well, the kind of forward thrusts.
And his face as well. The guys, there is something sexual about just the face from behind there. I mean, this definitely goes across the line in terms of like depictions in taste as well. Do you know what I'm saying? And unreality. This is kind of like two evil, scheming Arabs who have caught two white women in the deserts and brought them back to the mine.
I did sequence them in this order, and we're going to be getting to the next. Next one is the harem.
I also have to. I mean, that woman bears a striking resemblance to La Marianne. The French personification. And I wonder, given that this was 1910, if that was a deliberate choice by the painter to perhaps imply something here. Though I'm not sure. Because that was quite a popular.
Well, if maybe because he's Swiss, maybe he just hates the French. This is
maybe.
Well, his buyers were probably French, actually.
Yeah, okay.
And we've got to remember that a lot of mythological painting and Orientalist painting with nude figures is basically nude men as well as nude women, but in Orientalist painting it's mainly nude women, and this was it was kind of basically high-minded, sexy paintings.
High-minded sexy paintings. Yeah, I don't like that.
Which is when we move to the harem. Yes, so this is one of the most restrained paintings. So this is the women of Algiers. It said Tangiers, but of course it's Algiers. 1834. This is by Delacroix, of course. The harem. So this is women in their boudoir, served by the black slave. These were again probably Jewish women who posed for Delacroix, even though Delacroix is kind of describing them as Muslims.
Yeah.
Or at least the wives of a Muslim.
It's also important to illustrate for the viewers that, in case anybody is unfamiliar, so because what the harem actually was has been distorted, shall we say, by certain trends in Western media. So the harem was not this kind of sex palace. It was the residence of the Ottoman Emperor, or the sultans, or even lesser members of the nobility had them too. It was the residence of their concubines, wives, favorite women. It was just a big sort of residential house where they all lived, in a sense. So this is quite an accurate scene. You know, they would be quite well kept, well treated. They would probably have nice fabrics. If from my reading on the subject, I would say one inaccuracy perhaps is that they're not with children. The harem was full. Pretty much every woman would have born a child because, you know, contraception wasn't available, and Ottoman princes like to have a lot of sex, so kind of a consequence of that. But yes, this is basically what life in the harem was. It was a lot of women talking, lounging around in buildings very much like this, basically.
Again, I think just in terms of like layout and compared to some of the other stuff we've seen, that the harem is always about sumptuousness, and you can see all the kind of fabrics and the bright colors coming from it. This, as you said, was a relatively this will be the tamest picture of women, I think, in the entire series. Basically,
yes.
You've got the hooker smoking across here. So again, all about the props. The kind of nice little detail of some of the kind of silverware at the top across there. The tiles, of course, which is a staple for both internal palaces, the harem, and the bathhouses as well. So some nice little Oriental touches. And then, yeah, you've got that kind of conversation going on there. Maybe someone speaking out to the slave who's kind of turning around. So you've got quite an interesting pose there. And then again, the character looking directly at you. I don't necessarily think it's kind of like that suggestive, but
no, not really.
No.
I think it's more like conversational. You're meant to be feeling like you're sort of sitting down, having a chat with some of them. But I mean, Delacroix's making it seem like quite a pleasant place, basically quite a chill, cozy corner.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Also, it's correct. Oh, was it? What is this? No.
Hang on, I think you skipped a few.
No. I
put them in different order, have you?
No. I put this one on. I put this as in Gresin, but I meant to put it in the bar section, so I'll move it on. No, you didn't see that. I don't want to spoil or anything else. I'll move it along, and if I put it in the wrong place, we can. Yeah. Oh no, we are into the bath section.
Yeah, we're into the. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm going to put in Gresin here because he's my vote for the most Kumariest of Orientals here.
He's trying to fill as much of the percentage of the picture surface with naked women.
It is, and he's got
60%, at least 60% of the.
we could do a kind of pixel analysis, couldn't we, and just work out exactly the percentage here, and then shame him for Kumarism.
Yeah. So Ingres is the most famous of the neoclassical painters. he was famously in a rivalry with Delacroix. By the way, this picture is very detailed, so that's why
It's struggling,
It's
isn't
my,
it?
it's my potato internet. I'll go
The
back.
computer is just
Okay.
shocked at this
Okay.
degeneracy. Yeah.
So this is the Turkish bath of 1862. I think it was commissioned by a Turkish diplomat, as far as I know. I'm not sure, but this is obviously this is basically a compilation of all different figure types in all different poses, all just jammed together, and it's basically just an orgiastic display.
Yeah, and again, I love the fact that it's in a circle, because there's something automatically voyeuristic about it. You're kind of peeping through into a space that you shouldn't see. It's kind of like guessing what goes on behind closed doors
through the keyhole.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's some great little moments in this, including kind of like the little couple across here, the kind of the breast fondling. You've got this kind of woman just looking longingly at the voyeur just laid out.
Based on the artist's second wife, I believe.
Oh, okay, that's a good fact.
I'm also I'm rather confused at the physics of this picture, I have to say. If you see what I mean.
It's this character is out of place, basically.
Well, you've got it. There's an awful lot of breast in this picture, and none of them seem to be realistically rendered. Should we put it? I don't know if that was a mistake or if that was a deliberate erotic choice. I can't really be sure, but that it does seem to it is a technical point away from the piece, I think.
Okay. I'm not commenting. I'm not commenting either.
I'm not such a breast physics aficionado as yourself, Panama.
No, it just seems like a confusing angle is all.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
totally.
basically, the paintings, I find one of his most ridiculous bits of work. It's unrealistic. It's just totally. It's just like stupid levels of consumerism that goes on there. Yeah. What I do like is just
they should all be wearing bikinis. That's what Ferro means.
No, it's not the nudity. It's just the fact. Look, she's literally cupping the other girl's tit. It does in a bathhouse. It's like it's stupid. It's
also, this is not.
Nothing sexual ever happens in a bathhouse, according to Ferro.
Well, I think it would be fair to say that a lot of the paintings, or most of the paintings that we've seen so far, were painted by men who either knew a great deal about the aesthetics and the history and the culture of the countries they were painting, or they literally went there and painted them. I don't why is there just this like Arab Turkish bathhouse crammed with like nude Caucasian women who don't appear to be doing anything in particular? It just seems like, okay, I'm just going to paint a room full of naked women, and I'll throw in the Turkish bath element as a
that is entirely why it was painted. Yes, absolutely. It is an impossible fantasy which breaks the laws of physics and logic and reality.
Yes.
Also, the lighting is totally different for her than everyone else.
Yes,
come on. But I really like this single figure. I feel like I wonder whether he changed his mind or something like that, because this figure is.
That figure is actually based on another figure called the Bather of Valpison, which was a different painting which he did earlier, and this was kind of like him. This was like a greatest hits remix, as AA would say.
Oh dear!
He was sampling his earlier work.
Well, I must check out the earlier painting, because I think she's quite good.
Yeah, the earlier painting is actually better and it's nicer.
Yeah. Anyway, there you go. I put that in because I'd seen it before and I just thought it was ridiculous. But there you go.
Coom.
So here we have Jerome again. So this is the large pool of Bursa. Bursa is a city in Turkey. This is 1885. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Much more realistic, I would say, from a historical point of view, given that this is, especially I'm much more sympathetic to Jerome because he went to these places. So I would say that there's perhaps the women are a bit too European looking, but that's the only real criticism in that sense. The bathhouses were also a sort of social place, so there would be people like hanging around and talking and things in them. I mean, technically, I'm completely amazed by this. The sense of scale of the room. You know, it's like being in some great crypt with these great arches and the rays of light coming through and the figures and the water. I mean, I'm sure we can all agree how talented. I mean, you said Pharaoh that was it Pharaoh or Alexander? You said that he may be one of the greatest painters of all time.
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
fair,
in
but
my
I would concur. And also, you can tell that this is from the same painter of the guy who did the Roman arena, the gladiator.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
again, it's the way he lays out scenes. This is like a classic Jerome trope. Is again the kind of the like it's not like a full on wide shot, but pretty wide, and then this gets used by a lot of late Victorian academics like Alma like Leighton does a few pictures like this, and obviously Waterhouse as well. So I think it's just hugely influential for like other history paintings later. Like again, just going back to the kind of erotic versus the actual versus the kind of coom, and again, there it's purely historical. There's little elements of the erotic. I think like the lady bathing in the background bent over, or the woman sitting down. I think those are those kind of little spicier moments, or again like the woman's buttocks across there. He's placing those little touches to make it an interesting painting. But again, it's sorry.
So if you do a close up of the shoes, you do close up on that.
I can't on this one.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Well, they were basically they were common in Turkey, and you can see them in other pictures of the period.
Yeah, and he's got like a couple of little scenes within the main scene. You've got the kind of people talking at the back here, the family with the kid. The kind of group of ladies there. So it feels real because he again, like you said, he's seen what it's like to be in a bath, and it's not everyone piled in together fondling each other. No. It's just loads of people having like random conversations about stuff. But then again, just some of the poses that he clearly machinates intentionally. Again, like who walks around like this in reality, just like with your arm down and this beautiful classical pose. He's still drawing on. This is another contrapposto again, and you can see all the weight on the left leg from behind, and even the black woman has got this specific, quite classical pose to it. So he's machinating these little pieces to kind of show off his skills, to show the kind of beautiful classic form. And again, I love the use of light and darkness, just like with the light of the Colosseum.
I believe in the Colosseum picture, it may be. I think the Romans had strips of canvas across the top.
They had awnings. They had awnings.
Yeah. So again, I think much more tasteful.
So this is Noé. Another French painter. So this is a white slave of 1888. You can see there that she's smoking a cigarette, actually, I think it is. And then there's like a dish with couscous, and she's got a carved wooden spoon. And there's also so then there's an orange that's been cut, and there are some dates there and some wine. And this is kind of like it's almost like a sort of Edwardian decadence.
Yes.
She kind of looks like a bit like a femme fatale there, with like the cigarette and like the smoking as well. The pursed lips looking upwards. There's something coquettishness about her face. But again, it's got those. Again, it's all about the props again, isn't it? Just to kind of make it feel like. I feel like this is probably like done in France rather than abroad.
So agree. I have to say that Ingres never went to the Near East. Delacroix did, Jérôme did. So some went and some didn't go.
Yeah.
Most of the ones we're showing did.
Yeah. I think it's not too bad, but not my favourite, I would say. But again, I like the little details down here. The spoon, the couscous spoon.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Ingres again. This is odaliscan slave of 1839, as you can see from the screen. Black slaves are very commonly presented in these. There's some talk about whether or not they were. I think they were thought of as low status. Many of the male slaves were also eunuchs because they were castrated.
It was the so yes, that's true, and I believe so. The main difference is that you had paler skinned women being used as sexual slaves, basically, and also concubines, entertainers, dancers, etc. And then Nubian or black slaves were basically used either for labor or housework, or like here you see as kind of like guards, or as kind of stewards, I suppose. Generally, I believe that was how it went.
Again, for me, I think Ongres crosses the line of Coombe levels. You've got this again, the kind of classic Venus laid out, but again, if you compare this to like a Titian Venus lying down, the difference is, for me, it's just like the orgasmic face that she's got and the hands up, the kind of looser hair, and again, there's just enough fabric to cover her modesty here. So again, I think he's really pushing it. But I think this is a much better scene than the bath, the bathhouse. And again, like there's a nice little moment here with the musician. He's kind of playing, but like looking up at the ceiling, like. And again, the kind of steward in the corner looks pretty cool. So.
I have to say, Pharaoh, I'm not going to make this particularly crude, but the Venus of Urbino by Titian shows.
Okay, let's bring up.
Okay, we'll just look at this, like Venus Urbino. Yeah, what's she doing with her hand, mate?
Yeah, she's covering.
No, she's not.
Actually. She is.
You've
got a filthy mind.
No,
Absolutely,
I'm afraid not. I'm afraid the fingertips are where you think they are.
No, you just absolutely disgusting.
You're just in.
Let's.
Okay.
It's going to be a falling out over the Venus of Urbino between
Pharaoh and
Am
I going to get banned from the channel for pointing out something that is true?
Painted
footprints in his private apartment, but no, he's definitely not doing anything rude.
So it's the face as well. What I'm saying is, it's the face.
Okay.
I've lost the. I'm trying to find the comparison. My internet's
hot and flustered.
Oh, there we go. Look, okay. Just look at Titian's face across there. It's just a normal woman. She's just hanging out. Exactly. Dignity and beauty. She's orgasming. That's the difference, and that's where it's crossed the line.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
We'll leave it to the voters to leave technical comments.
Yeah,
please leave a comment.
Press one if you think she's covering. Press 2 if you think she's doing something naughty.
Okay. No. That's not what I'm saying.
The stream gets us taken down.
I'm saying that the Ingris picture is verging on pornographic. That's in my mind. I think it's crossing the taste line into like pin-up stuff instead, in my mind. While the Titian, as ever, masterful, tasteful, just pure class. Apart from maybe the hands. I haven't decided yet. All
right.
Well, we're getting some votes.
We're getting mostly covering, it seems, is the vote. So
exactly.
Pharaoh, you were.
It's a refined and tasteful audience there.
The argument for popularity is not the truth. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay.
Anyway, so here we have Osman Hamdi Bey.
Wait a second.
Sorry. Okay.
On a second. I think we've gone over 2 hours, haven't we?
Yeah.
Orientalism Part 2.
I wonder because I've got all of my stuff that I didn't have time for. So we could have this last little section and postpone it to next time, if that's okay.
we could fold in some British painters and some other subjects.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd say,
Perfect.
yeah.
Well, let's leave it at that. Any comments, Alexander or Panama, on what we've seen so far?
I would say that it didn't occur to me just how much Orientalism began as a kind of genuine awe and kind of marvel at the way life was in the Eastern world, and then it just descended by 1910. It was just like pure Kumari, like just no curiosity, no real effort to make it historically authentic. Just bung in some Arabs with big grins and a naked white woman, and bish bash bosh. There's your Orientalist painting. I mean, that was I didn't realize that it sort of went that way quite so badly. Far cry from the earlier pieces.
Yes, I think also we've kind of neglected. We'll probably discuss modernism, what Matisse and Gauguin did in the next stream, because they. So I mean that's sort of the last development of Orientalism before it basically became extinct in sort of the 1920s, basically. So you've had lots of controversy. You have lots of different subjects, variety of images, some great paintings, some not so great paintings.
Do we have this meme that was mentioned at the start of the stream?
Oh yes, show us the meme.
I haven't seen this.
Can you find the AA? It's on AA's Twitter.
I'll just give me a second. I've got it preloaded.
So while Ferro does that, I will shill my books. So if you want to support my work, please buy copies of my books, which are Culture War and Iconoclasm. They're available on all internet book-selling sites and also regular bookshops, if there are still bookshops around. So here is the meme.
So this is taken from Jerome's Carpet Seller. So obviously there was some discussion about AA being the Persian that he is selling the carpet, and then we've obviously got the NRX boys there. AA is flogging the carpet too. Here is I am looking on. I know maybe I'm looking to purchase it as well.
Directing the sale, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly.
You're the cultural advisor, the aesthetic consultant.
Well, I'm a merchant by trade, so I'm probably some kind of international merchant. Then you've got the pasta posse.
No, you've forgotten Mr. D.
I'm working up to Mr. D. I'm working up to him. It's all about building up the story.
Yeah.
Pasta posse looking on in disgust from afar. There you go. This is a
historical distance.
Wrap it. Yeah. I imagine she just like shoots him the worst evil looks or whatever when it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and they're still.
What I like is that she comes to the door clearly carrying the child, so that it just makes a noise and shouts at him, and he's
exactly. Background minions, and then we've got a wonderful Mr. D.
He's that is a real.
Exactly,
what
great
Mr. D
pantaloons.
looks like.
Exactly, big ginger beard, and then in the corner, a little Libyan minion Panama hat.
I'm simply looking the guy that carries the carpets around for the merchant. I mean, I suppose I've come like apropos of Mr. D.
You probably
his sideman.
Yeah,
he is the organ grinder.
Well, he says that you run in a little wheel to run his internet, apparently.
Yes, that's how I keep fit. But funnily enough, the outfits in this, the breeches, I saw a film recently called Black and White in Color, which is like set in this French outpost in like 1914 or so in Africa. And I have to say, the uniforms of the African troops are very, very good. The white trousers and like blue hussar coats and red fezzes. I may consider getting one of these outfits just for the lark because they're good. So I mean, I actually think we should all return to this style of clothing and these sorts of rugs. Wouldn't it be a much nicer time? Pharaoh, you could have your pistols and swords all stuffed into the front of the sash.
Well, you can still buy that because again, I spent a bit of time in the Balkans, and they still sell them like in different antique places because they were used. What's interesting was that kind of Ottoman style sort of descended down to the local cultures as well. So you can still order them today, but Yes, I can talk about Persian rugs as well for a long period of time, but that is for another day. And I think let us leave it at that. But just from my side, hopefully we've shown you tonight that Orientalism is nothing like what has been held against it. It's not this kind of horrible like power imbalance, the colonial imposing his ideas, but a genuinely like an honest and detailed look at those cultures in pursuit of beauty. Even and again, I think stuff obviously Jerome, but there's Delacroix doing a great job with some of those brilliant dynamic paintings as well. So Alexander, you've already shilled your book. Is there anything else you want to chat about, or
no? Just you can find a couple of articles on my website about Orientalist artists. So just sort of skim through, and you'll find something of interest, I think.
And Mr. Hatt?
Nothing to shill. More videos on the channel in the near future. Islam is a religion of peace. Nothing to lose but our chains. Toodle pip.
I'm just going to show we both Alexander and myself were on a Deepest Law stream on Thursday on the Academic Agents channel, talking about traditional art versus modern art and trying to create some of those different, mark out what those differentials are and all the discussion around that. So if you haven't seen it, please tune in, because it was a really interesting stream. I thought for myself, it wasn't kind of like one side just bashing the other. It was a good debate, and then Mr. D popped in on the end as well as AA for some good additional chat. So really worth a listen. But thank you both for tonight. Like I said, we'll obviously do part 2 in maybe 2 weeks' time. And thank you very much, everyone, and catch you all later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Oh,
all right. Oh, so he's exited himself.
Very good. Okay. Yes. Anyway, very much enjoyed that.
Cool. If you'd like to send me,
hang on.